What's up and welcome to Guiding Bolt. I'm Jessica and today we're going to learn how to refinish a kitchen table. In this video, we'll cover steps 1 and 2 out of 4 in the process. These include how to remove the old finish from the table and how to sand the surface. In part 2, we'll cover steps 3 and 4, how to stain the table, and finally, how to finish off the project with a sealant. This is a great project even for beginners. Don't worry, if you've never refinished a piece of furniture before, this project is approachable and doable for first-timers. If you devote full days to focus on your efforts, the project can be completed in about 1 week's time. Being more realistic though, it'll likely take a few weeks to complete. Don't let that discourage you from taking your table from drab to fab though. Remember, patience is key throughout the process, especially when it comes to sanding. Feel free to use the links in the description below to jump around, but otherwise, let's get started.
The first part of our process involves removing the old finish from the table surface and then sanding it down and prepping it for the next stage, which would be the staining and sealing with a new polyurethane sealant coat. So some of the things you'll need for this stage of the project is you're first going to want a stripper that will remove the old finish, the old varnish. Now I started by using the Citri Strip paint and varnish stripping gel, and while this product did work, it was very slow to work, and I'll tell you, I was not patient. So it takes about 20 to 30 minutes after applying it for it to start to loosen up the old finish before you can kind of scrape it off. But you have to make sure that you keep the surface wet during that time period. So that wasn't cutting it for me. So I decided to try the 2-minute remover advanced, and this stuff worked a whole heck of a lot better. You put this on and mere minutes later it's ready to start scraping off. So I'd highly recommend this variety over the Citri Strip. It'll be helpful if you have a couple of disposable containers so you can pour out your materials as you're working with them. You're going to want a spatula. This will help you scrape off the old finish. I would recommend taking a file and kind of rounding off the corners so that they don't dig in and scratch up your surface as you're taking off the old finish. You'll want some mineral spirits. This not only helps clear up any of the varnish remover that might still be on the surface, but once you're done sanding, this can also be used again to clean up any remaining dust particles, and it helps kind of precondition the wood and get it ready to be stained. White rags, always helpful to have on hand no matter the project you're working on. You're going to want some disposable paintbrushes. You can go with the foam or bristle variety. Do make sure that the bristles are a natural bristle because of the materials we're working with. I personally prefer bristles. I feel like I have a little bit more control of the amount of product that's in the bristles versus the foam brush. Safety is very important. You want to make sure that you're in proper working conditions. I'm working out in my garage. I have the doors open. I have great cross ventilation. I have gloves here. These are meant for working with chemicals. These are not the type of rubber gloves you wear when cleaning the kitchen. I don't have them out on the table here, but eye protection is always a good thing as well. And then of course a respirator. So my respirator here does have particle filters for when I'm sanding, but then it also has filters for the organic vapors to protect me when I'm using the mineral spirits and the varnish remover. If you don't know much about respirators, check out my video. It was made for those who do costuming, but the same principles apply no matter what setting you're using the respirator in. And then of course, we have our sanding materials. Here again, I would recommend getting the random orbital sander. This will make your job a lot easier in terms of sanding, and it's a fairly forgiving tool for those who are new to using power tools and power sanders. And of course, you'll want discs to go on your random orbital sander. I worked in 120, 180, and 220 grit. Reminder, you'll start with the lower number grit and work up to the higher number. The higher the number, the smoother the paper becomes. The 220 is a finishing grit. If you have sides or edges to your table that aren't flat, or maybe you're redoing the table legs, I'd recommend picking up some steel wool. The medium to medium coarse variety will be what you use to kind of scrape off the varnish remover instead of using that putty knife. And then the very fine stuff will help you do that final pass with the mineral spirits to kind of clean up the table, get rid of any of the extra varnish remover that might still be present. And then again, you want to be able to sand the edges of the table or the table legs, so you'll want some sheets of sandpaper blocks, whatever works best for you.
When applying your finish remover, you want to liberally apply it to the surface, but you don't want to sit and brush it back and forth like you would with paint. And we'll be working in small sections of the table to allow the product to do its job without drying out. And notice that I'm working with the grain of the wood. So we're going to give this a couple minutes to work. This stuff works fast, like I mentioned earlier, and you probably can't see it with the camera, but you'll actually kind of start to see it bubbling and lifting up from the surface here as it's doing its work. So now that it's had a couple minutes to work, we're going to go ahead and use our spatula here to go across the surface of the table to remove the old finish. Now it's helpful if you have an old cardboard box to kind of catch the guck as it comes off here. Now I'm not applying too much downward pressure. That's really just the angle of the spatula as I go that's scraping off the surface finish here. And again, I'm going with the grain of the wood here. So I'll come back here, and you can already see the difference in color with that first pass compared to the other areas of the table. So I'm going to repeat this process down the whole length of the table. I'll probably put out enough varnish remover to kind of do 2 passes of the spatula, and then I'll come back and do the whole surface a second time. Depending on your surface and the previous finish that was there, you might need to even do a 3rd pass.
So I just finished scraping off the second layer of varnish and lacquer remover from the right-hand side. I've done 2 passes over here, so you can start to see that it's a little bit more bare. You can see more of the natural wood grain going on here compared to this other side that is still untouched. So I'm going to continue cleaning up both sides of the table here, and then we'll move to the table edges.
Now that we've completed stripping the top of the table, it's time to strip the sides of the table. We're going to do the same process with our finish remover, but instead of using the scraper, we're going to be using our steel wool. And this is a great opportunity to clean up the edges of the table where maybe your scraper didn't quite get. Now that the table has been stripped of its previous finish, we're going to take mineral spirits and clean off the surface to get rid of any remaining residue using our very fine steel wool. We're just going to liberally apply this to the surface in the direction of the grain. And then we're going to take our steel wool in long, smooth passes with the grain and just clean the surface. Get it prepped for sanding.
So here's what the surface of the table looks like after it's been fully stripped and then cleaned with mineral spirits and then dried out a little bit on the surface.
It's now time to sand the surface of the table. I've already gone ahead and hit the edges with sandpaper, working my way up to that 220 grit, and now I'm working on the surface of the table with the random orbit sander. You can see I've already hit the left-hand side with the 120 grit, and now I'm about to start the right-hand side, and I'll continue to work my way from the 180 up to the 220 finishing grit sandpaper, making sure I get the whole surface nice and smooth, taking my time to avoid any pigtail swirls.
Congratulations! You finished steps 1 and 2 to refinish your kitchen table. Join me for part 2 where we stain our table and then seal it with a polyurethane coat. Keep up the good work, your table's looking great.